My name is Zoe Hartman. I'm 62 years old, a retired chief accountant who once believed numbers could explain everything. For most of my life, I thought order meant safety, until the night my phone rang at 3 in the morning. The rain outside was steady, the kind that sounds like regret on a rooftop, and when I reached for the phone, I already knew the world I built was about to break. Before I tell you what happened, if you've ever believed that truth can hide in silence, stay with me. You might find a piece of yourself in this story. And if you want to hear more stories about quiet justice, dignity, and second chances, make sure you follow this channel so you don't miss what comes next. That night, my son's voice was shaking. "Mom, please. They think I stole from my boss." His words came through broken breaths, each one cutting deeper than the last. I sat up, heart pounding, trying to understand. Jacob was never perfect, but he was honest to a fault. The idea of him stealing $250,000 felt absurd. "Where are you?" I asked. "The police station," he whispered. "They said it's fraud. I didn't do it. I didn't even put on proper shoes." I grabbed my raincoat, my keys, and the old leather folder that once belonged to his father. It was filled with documents from the company where he used to work, a company now run by Martin Kent, my second husband. By the time I started the car, the wipers were already fighting against the storm. The road ahead was empty, slick, and merciless, and for the first time in years, I felt small inside my own silence. When I arrived at the station, the fluorescent lights painted everything in a cold, sterile blue. Jacob sat behind a desk, his hands clasped, his face pale. Detective Lyle, the man in charge, looked tired but confident. And then Martin walked in, wearing the calm expression of someone who already knew the ending. "Zoe," he said warmly, "I came as soon as I heard. Let's not make this worse than it already is." His voice carried that fatherly tone people mistake for kindness. He put a hand on my shoulder as if we were partners in crisis. "Jacob's young. Mistakes happen. We'll keep it quiet. Handle it internally." His words slid like oil across the surface of something foul. I turned to my son. "Is this true?" Jacob shook his head fiercely. "They said the money was wired from my terminal, Mom, but I swear." The detective interrupted, holding up a printed statement. The transfer came from his login credentials, digital signature verified. I knew that tone too well. In my career, I'd used it myself, the certainty of numbers as proof, but something in the report didn't sit right. I asked to see the papers. Lyle hesitated. Martin nodded, pretending to mediate. "Let her look," he said smoothly. He always enjoyed playing the generous man. The first page was a summary of the alleged fraud, a transfer to a subsidiary of Kent Group marked Consulting Services. The timestamp matched the night Jacob had been home fixing the garage door. I flipped to the authorization line and froze. The approving signature belonged to my late husband, David Hartman, dated 6 months after his death. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single line of ink. I could still see David's handwriting in my mind, precise but gentle, the way he used to sign Christmas cards. My throat tightened. "Where did this come from?" I asked quietly. Lyle looked confused. "That's the system record, pulled directly from the company's archive." I turned to Martin. He was already shaking his head, a performance of disappointment. "Zoe, grief can make us see things," he said softly. "David's name must have been reused in a template. Don't overthink it." But I saw the faint impression of a scan mark. the same kind David's old printer used to leave on the edge of every page. It was no template. I took a breath and held up the folder I had brought. "Detective," I said, "my husband's original financial files are here. I'd like to compare them." Lyle hesitated, caught between procedure and politics. Martin spoke before he could answer. "Zoe, please, let's go home. You're exhausted." The way he said it, so controlled, so rehearsed, made something inside me wake up. For years, I trusted that calm voice, believing it meant protection. Now it sounded like a warning disguised as care. I opened the folder and pulled out the last audit David ever signed. The ink, the slant of the pen, the spacing, they were identical to the fraudulent document. Identical down to the faint skip in the letter H that only appeared after David injured his wrist in 2017. Lyle leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "That's unusual." I watched him shift his gaze between the papers, doubt forming like condensation on glass. Martin exhaled, a quiet sigh meant to reclaim control. "Detective, my wife has been under stress since David passed. Let's not build stories from coincidences." His tone wasn't angry. It didn't need to be. Power rarely raises its voice. I said nothing, only met Lyle's eyes. "I think you'll want to verify the signature dates," I murmured. He nodded slowly, folding the report. "Mrs. Hartman," he said after a pause, "could I speak with you privately?" Martin smiled, the way people do when they think the ending is already written. "Of course," he said, "but please, let's keep this civil." In the small interview room, the walls seemed closer than before. Lyle closed the door, lowered his voice. "Ma'am," he began, "you mentioned your husband's old files. Are they official records?" I nodded. "Certified and notarized." He hesitated, glancing at the papers again. "Then we may have a problem." His tone shifted, less authoritative, more human. "I'll need to verify these. If what you're saying is true, your son might not be the suspect here." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "What are you implying?" He rubbed his temples. "I can't say yet, but someone higher up may have used your husband's credentials to authorize false transfers. Please, keep this between us for now." His eyes flicked toward the window where Martin's silhouette waited like a shadow. "He's influential. I need to tread carefully." When I stepped back into the main room, Martin was speaking softly to Jacob. "These things happen, son," he said. "Your mother's just confused. I'll make sure you're treated fairly." Jacob looked at me, searching for clarity. I forced a small smile. "We'll sort this out," I told him. Then I turned to Martin. "Thank you for coming, but I'll take it from here." His eyes narrowed just slightly, but the smile never faltered. "Of course, we're family." He touched the ring on his finger, a gold band engraved with the Kent Group logo. And for a fleeting second, the fluorescent light caught the emblem in a way that felt almost deliberate, as if it wanted to be seen. I stored that image away. By the time Jacob was led back to Holding for further questioning, the rain outside had softened into mist. I waited by the car, the folder pressed against my chest. The streetlights shimmered through the wet glass like fractured stars. My reflection looked older, but clearer. I remember David once telling me, "Numbers never lie, Zoe. People do." I used to think that meant trust the math. Tonight, it meant something else entirely. On the drive home, the radio played faintly, a love song from the 70s we used to dance to. I turned it off. The sound of the wipers and my own breathing filled the car. For the first time since his death, I spoke aloud to David as if he were beside me. "I saw your name tonight," I whispered. "They're using you to hurt him. I won't let them." I didn't sleep. I spread the papers across my kitchen table, comparing fonts, ink tones, margins. Every detail mattered. At dawn, the sunlight filtered through the blinds, slicing the room into lines of gold and shadow. Somewhere in that quiet light, I realized this wasn't just about clearing my son's name. It was about finding the truth buried in the company that once defined our lives. When my phone buzzed again, it wasn't Jacob this time. It was Martin. "Zoe." His voice came calm and deliberate. "Don't do anything rash. The company's reputation is at stake. Let me handle it." I looked at the folder on the table, at David's signature staring back like an accusation across time. "I'm sure you will," I said, and hung up. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried its weight. I closed the blinds, locked the door, and opened my husband's old laptop. It had been untouched for years, but tonight it would speak again. If numbers once served as the language of deceit, they would now become the language of truth. I returned to the station at first light with a burned tongue from bad coffee and my husband's folder under my arm. Puddles held the ceiling lights like trapped moons. I told myself I was there to deliver documents, but I wanted to watch how power moved in daylight. Detective Lyle met me near the counter. "Mrs. Hartman, we're still reviewing what you brought." "I have the originals," I said. "And the seals." He gestured toward a hall. "Conference 2. I drifted toward the sound of a printer. Martin stood beside it like a conductor. Suit perfect, smile effortless. A young analyst hovered. 2 officers nearby as if he were their guest of honor. "Zoe," he said pleasantly, "I'm arranging outside counsel for Jacob. He shouldn't be alone in this." "Chosen by the company that says he harmed it," I answered. "Very kind." He laughed softly. "Let's not sharpen this. It only hurts him." The analyst handed him a packet. Martin skimmed and passed it to me, generous in the way of a man sure of the ending. I sat at a side table and flipped through lines that tried to look inevitable. The memo line read Consulting North Point. The project tag looked familiar. The labyrinth of alphanumeric codes my husband once designed to keep budgets honest. One character had been altered to justify an external payment without a second signature. The change was clever, but it missed his quiet marker, a checksum he'd woven into internal tags after a wrist injury changed his handwriting. The pattern had never been public. Whoever assembled this copied an old internal tag and edited it, but forgot the... Martin leaned against the table, careful to be close without crowding. "Let me drive you home," he said. "We can talk without all this noise." "Who generated this tag?" I asked. "The system," he said mildly. "Approvals are automated. We barely touch them." "Barely," I repeated. Detective Lyle appeared with a folder. "Mrs. Hartman, may we speak?" Inside the conference room, he closed the door. "We pulled the archive," he said. "Dates look consistent, but the metadata on the authorization files is out of sequence. There may have been a substitution." "Then someone swapped documents after the fact," I said. "That's one reading," he answered carefully. "To pursue it, I'll need internal backups, and I'll need to move without tripping politics." I slid the page toward him. "This tag is wrong. My husband built a checksum into internal tags. It's missing here. Compare older entries." He studied the code. Certainty in his face softened. "If that pattern holds, it suggests fabrication. It suggests intent," I said. He nodded. I'll issue a preservation notice. The door opened. Martin stepped in, apologetic smile already lit. Forgive me, detective. May I speak with my wife? Whatever you want to say. Say it here, I said. He spread his hands. Zoe, grief turns memories into spears. You're angry the company changed after David. Don't turn that anger on Jacob. Let me resolve this quietly. I'll reimburse the amount, classify it as an internal error, and keep Jacob's name out of the record. And keep Light out as well, I replied. Light is for theaters, he said gently. Companies run on discretion. Truth runs on oxygen. Lyle shifted. Martin reached for the packet. I kept my hand there. The room held its breath. He released it first. Detective, he said smoothly, please treat my family with respect. We're cooperating fully. We'll follow the evidence, Lyle said. Martin touched the gold ring on his finger, the company emblem catching a square of ceiling light and throwing it across the table like a signature. The redesigned logo looked less like partnership now and more like a lock. He stroked it with his thumb, a habit he saved for delicate messages. I'll have a car follow you home, he told me. I drove myself, then let my driver trail you, for safety. I'll be fine. I walked past him into the corridor. Behind the glass, Jacob waited with his hands pressed together, as if bracing the edges of his life. I set my palm on the glass. He looked up. For an instant, I saw a boy with a broken paper airplane, jaw trembling, waiting for the promise that we would fix it. I gave him that small smile. He nodded. Back in the room, Lyle stacked the pages. I'll request a mirror of the company servers, he said. Pension records first. You'll find irregular deposits routed through a charitable fund with a generous name, I said. You've seen them? I know where to look. He looked at me as though measuring the cost. If this goes where I think, it won't be easy. Nothing worth saving is, I said. By late morning, the station found its daytime rhythm. Phones rang, doors clicked. The analyst ferried stapled stacks like offerings. Martin lingered near the exit, speaking to a sergeant who laughed at something soft he said. Rooms bend around certain men. I asked a guard for 5 minutes with Jacob. Inside, he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. They think I did it, he whispered. They look at me like I confessed. You didn't, I said. We'll show it. He swallowed. I said awful things after Dad died. I blamed you for moving on. I believed Martin. He was skilled at looking like an answer, I said. Tell the truth the same way every time. If you don't know, say you don't know. He nodded. I pressed my palm to the glass again. He matched it. The guard cleared his throat. When I returned to the hall, Martin waited. Your devotion is admirable, he said, lightly. Faith can blind as quickly as grief. Is that what you tell yourself when you move money that isn't yours? His eyes flashed and cooled. Careful. You first. He stepped closer, lowering the air by a degree. I protected this family, he said. I carried the company through storms that would have buried David. Do not insult what you don't understand. Then the records will honor you, I answered. Records do that when they're honest. He smiled with teeth. We'll see. Lyle walked up with a printed notice. Mr. Kent, we're issuing a preservation order and requesting a secure export of financial logs for the last 5 years. Our office will coordinate with compliance. Martin's jaw tightened like a swollen door. I'll have legal review it. It isn't a request, Lyle said. It's a notice. Martin measured him, then nodded as if concluding a deal. Of course, we're eager to help. He moved toward the exit. The morning light struck his ring and set the emblem glowing. He slipped on his coat, adjusted his tie, and left with the calm of a man used to favorable horizons. I stood in the corridor with the packet trying to sell me a lie. My hands trembled. I waited it out, then crossed to the copy room where the printer hummed like a heartbeat. I scanned the pages to my email with a note to myself. Do not let them rename the truth. Outside, winter brightness made the shadows knife-sharp. Martin's car pulled away from the curb, tinted window mirroring the sky. I pictured him inside arranging a story, smoothing edges by phone. A shallow puddle near the steps held the clouds so perfectly it looked deeper than the sky above. I stepped around it. At the corner, I looked back. Through the glass, I saw Lyle at his desk, picking up the phone, setting it down, then picking it up again and speaking to someone he didn't call often. I hoped he was choosing courage over comfort. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't know. I can help if you keep me out of it. Meet where we used to get coffee 12 years ago. Come alone. The name below it pulled breath from my chest. Anita. She had left the company after a scandal that was never allowed a name. She believed in rules until the rules failed decent people. If she was reaching out now, a sealed door had shifted. I replied with 2 words, 30 minutes. Before I walked away, I looked once more at the station doors. The people inside believed they held the story and were already shaping it for daylight. But stories don't end when a room decides they do. Stories end when the truth lifts its head and refuses to bow. I tucked the folder under my arm and headed for my car in a yellow zone I had ignored without guilt. Sunlight struck the windshield and turned it white, wiping my reflection for a heartbeat. The absence didn't scare me. It felt like the start of a correct equation. I drove toward the cafe, counting breaths, counting facts, refusing easy comfort or excuses. The cafe was quieter than I remembered, the kind of place where clocks seemed to slow down out of respect for secrets. Anita sat by the window with her hands wrapped around a paper cup, her eyes scanning the street before they found me. Time had made her smaller, but not weaker. She gave me a look that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite apology. I shouldn't have texted, she said, but I couldn't keep quiet anymore. I sat across from her. The smell of burnt espresso and rain-soaked coats lingered between us. You said you could help me, I replied softly. Does that mean you know what Martin's been doing? She hesitated. I know what he made us do. Back then, after David's death, there was a sudden restructuring. Offshore accounts, consulting projects that didn't exist. I signed compliance papers I wasn't allowed to read. Derek Vale handled the transfers. Martin said it was for charity work in the Caribbean. She exhaled. But the pattern was wrong. It looked clean, too clean, like someone washing guilt with precision. Derek still works there? I asked. She shook her head. Promoted, then vanished. I heard he bought a cabin near Lake Odessa. People said he's sick or scared. She slid a small envelope across the table. These are copies I made before I left. The originals went missing when the IRS started asking questions. Inside were 3 sheets of faded printouts, a memo chain signed by Derek, with Martin's initials in the margins. The dates overlapped with David's final audit cycle. Each line referenced a Kent Legacy Fund, the same name Detective Lyle had whispered yesterday. I felt my pulse in my throat. The IRS investigated this, I said. Why didn't they find anything? Because Martin hired their retired deputy as a consultant, she said bitterly. He bought silence before the questions got loud. Her fingers trembled. I've carried this for years, Zoe. I'm tired of fearing his voice. I folded the papers and slipped them into my folder. You did the right thing. She gave a broken laugh. Maybe 20 years too late. Be careful. He doesn't shout when he's angry. He rearranges your life until you think you chose the damage yourself. When I left the cafe, the morning light had lost its warmth. My phone buzzed with a call from Claire and Wen. Her voice was steady, calm, the way it always had been when she was my intern years ago. I got your message, she said. I'm ready to help. Jacob's still being held, I said. They're calling it embezzlement. I have signatures that shouldn't exist. Files that disappeared, and now this. You'll need a forensic review, she said. We'll build the case from data integrity. Start with your husband's archives. Any reference to Kent Group or offshore funds? Yes, the folder he kept after his last audit. He wrote a note before he died. Look for numbers that repeat. I thought it was sentiment. Maybe it wasn't. Clara paused. Numbers that repeat, she said thoughtfully. He might have embedded a pattern to trace laundering routes. I'll cross-check if you send scans. I'll do it tonight, I said. And Claire, thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said quietly. If Martin's behind this, he won't fight fair. By afternoon, clouds pressed low against the city, muting everything to shades of iron and smoke. I went home and opened the safe David built into the wall behind the bookcase. The combination still felt like muscle memory. His birthday, my son's, and the year we met. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and cedar. I pulled out the old folder marked 2018 internal audits. Beneath it lay a sealed envelope with David's handwriting. If anything happens, trust the math, but read between the lines. I didn't open it yet. I laid the new printouts beside the old records. David's final entries traced charitable transfers through a subsidiary in Texas, the same one tied to the missing $250,000. My husband had highlighted figures that reappeared in identical intervals, like echoes inside a wall. The phone rang again. I let it ring twice before answering. Zoe. Martin's voice came smooth, patient. I heard you met with old friends today. People talk, I said. I listen. He chuckled softly. That curiosity used to make you brilliant. It's making you reckless now. Let this go before you drown in ghosts. I'm already living with one, I said. You just borrowed his name to steal from his son. The pause on the line stretched thin. Then, almost tenderly, he said, You're angry because you loved a man who built walls. I build bridges. Sometimes bridges carry more than they should. You're right, I said. They collapse. I hung up. Evening settled in slow and heavy. I scanned the documents, each line a fragment of betrayal. Claire messaged me minutes later. Zoe, the IRS file tied to the Kent Legacy Fund, is marked Archived under Exemption 2B. That means it's been sealed or removed. Removed by whom? I texted. No idea. Possibly someone within Treasury or external counsel. We'll need leverage to access it. Maybe Derek. He's disappeared. Then find his shadow. I closed the laptop and finally opened David's envelope. Inside was a single handwritten page and a photograph of the three of us, smiling outside the old house. His note read, If you ever doubt the math, follow the silence. Truth hides where numbers stop talking. I stared at those words until the ink blurred. The next morning, Detective Lyle called. Mrs. Hartman is. Jacob will remain in custody another 48 hours. We're still missing confirmation on the secondary transfers. I can give you leads, I said. The Kent Legacy Fund, offshore accounts, and an internal tag with checksum inconsistencies. Check with your financial crimes unit. "I'll do what I can," he said, and lowered his voice. "For what it's worth, you were right about the signature. Forensics confirmed it was lifted from an old document. Whoever inserted it had access to your husband's scanned archives. That means internal theft. Or someone who shared his office once," he said quietly. I looked toward the study where David's framed photograph hung, his kind eyes forever frozen in mid-thought. "Then we start there." After the call, I dialed Claire again. "The evidence points to internal tampering," I said. "I'll draft an affidavit requesting IRS data access," she replied. "And Zoe, you should prepare for resistance. Martin's influence runs deep." "I'm not afraid of his influence," I said. "I'm afraid of silence." The day ended with thunder rolling over the rooftops, soft and constant. I stood by the window, watching the city flicker between light and shadow. Somewhere in that noise, I thought I heard David's voice, reminding me to stay patient, to read the pauses as carefully as the words. When I finally sat down, I listed every person who had touched the Kent Group's accounts in the past decade. At the top were two names, Martin Kent and Derek Vale. One still controlled the narrative, the other had vanished. Between them lay the truth, buried in balance sheets and washed through kind words. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass, older, sharper, unwilling to be managed. "You wanted to handle it quietly, Martin," I whispered. "So will I." I folded the letter, locked the folder, and called Claire one last time that night. "Tomorrow," I said, "we begin an audit of ghosts." That night, I parked 3 blocks from home, letting the engine tick in the cold until the silence became a sound of its own. My phone buzzed twice, then went dark again. Unknown number. I didn't answer. When I stepped out, the air smelled of wet asphalt and electricity. Somewhere behind me, a car idled longer than it should have. I walked without looking back, counting each breath like it could anchor me to reason. Inside, I placed my coat over the chair and locked every door. The folder lay open on the table, edges curled from use. I ran my hand across David's old handwriting. The words looked calm even in warning. My email pinged. It was from Claire. "The Treasury contact confirmed your suspicion. The Kent Legacy Fund was used to funnel unreported returns through a dummy foundation in 2019. I'll need evidence beyond signatures to tie it to Martin. Be cautious." I typed a quick reply. "Someone's watching the house. If anything happens, the backup drive is under the kitchen floorboard." I didn't hit send. The phone buzzed again, this time a message from an unlisted number. "Stop digging, or you'll bury him deeper." I read it twice, then deleted it, though my heart didn't believe in deletion. The knock came 10 minutes later. 3 soft taps, the rhythm of memory. When I opened the door, Anita stood there, drenched and trembling. "They know I talked," she said. "I saw a car near my building, the same one that followed me after the cafe." I pulled her inside. "You shouldn't have come here." She held up a small flash drive sealed in a plastic bag. "He left this for me years ago. Derek. Said to keep it safe until I heard the name Kent Legacy again. I think it's what he was afraid of." Her voice cracked. "You're the only one I trust." I took the drive carefully. It felt weightless and dangerous at once. "Stay here," I said. "I'll make tea." The act of boiling water, of doing something ordinary, steadied me. While she warmed by the heater, I plugged the drive into David's old laptop. The screen flickered, old icons waking from sleep. Folders appeared, all labeled with harmless names. Inventory, pension, 2012 reports. But inside the pension folder were encrypted documents marked with the initials DV and timestamps that stopped the year David died. I ran a decryption program Claire had given me. The first file opened to a report titled Kent Group Pension Consolidation 2012 Tanker Adjustment. Embedded within were payment trails leading to a shell account in the Caymans, the same account that had surfaced in the missing IRS record. My hand froze over the mouse. There was also a line labeled Hush Remittance Maritime Incident. I clicked it. The file contained audio logs between Martin and Derek. The sound was grainy but clear enough to recognize the calm authority in Martin's voice. "You'll classify it as an insurance offset," he said. "The tanker explosion never existed on our books." Derek's reply trembled. "People died, Martin." A pause. Then Martin again, almost gentle. "People forget, Derek. Numbers don't." I stopped the playback. Anita's face was pale, her eyes glistening. "That tanker. It was in the news for one day," she whispered. Then it disappeared. The sound of tires on wet gravel drifted through the window. Headlights flashed across the curtains. My pulse spiked. "Go to the back room," I said. "Don't turn on the lights." I peeked through the blinds. A black sedan idled across the street, engine running. The same one from before. I texted Eli Grant, the investigative journalist whose articles had once exposed a city zoning scandal. "I need help verifying something off record. Can we meet?" He replied almost instantly. "Send location." I hesitated, then sent the address of an all-night diner downtown. Anita clutched her coat. "If he finds out you have that drive." "He already knows," I said quietly. "He's always known where the truth hides." I drove through rain so thick it erased the city's edges. Eli was already at a booth, his notebook open, glasses fogged. "You look like you ran through a confession," he said. I handed him the flash drive. "This contains offshore payments tied to a false pension fund and a tanker accident covered up in 2012. Martin Kent's name appears in the metadata." He frowned. "Kent Group? That's big. You sure about the source?" "It came from Derek Vale, their CFO. He's missing now." Eli inserted the drive into his laptop. "These file signatures match Federal Archive protocols. Whoever saved them had system-level access." He looked at me over the screen. "You realize what this means? You're sitting on proof of financial fraud, possibly manslaughter." "I'm sitting on my husband's ghost," I said. "He warned me. The truth was never in the math." Eli leaned back. "Then let's give it a voice." He started copying the files to a secure cloud server. "If anything happens to you or me, the upload will trigger an automatic release to 3 journalists and 1 federal contact." I nodded. "Make sure Claire gets a copy too." We worked in silence, the rain beating against the diner windows like a metronome. At one point, Eli looked up and asked, "Why are you really doing this? For your son?" "For him, for David, and for every number Martin buried." The upload finished. He ejected the drive and slid it back to me. "Keep it hidden. The less you carry, the safer you are." Outside, the rain had slowed to a whisper. As I walked to the car, a shadow detached from the alley and followed at a distance. I didn't run. I drove straight to the riverfront, pulled into an abandoned parking lot, and waited. The sedan appeared minutes later. Lights dimmed. I turned off my engine, watching through the rearview mirror. After a moment, it reversed and drove away. When I returned Anita was gone. On the table was a note written in haste. He called. I can't risk you. Forgive me. My stomach turned cold. I checked the locks again and placed the flash drive inside the lining of David's old briefcase. At dawn, I called Claire. We have something tangible now. Audio, transaction logs, and offshore transfers. She exhaled slowly. Zoe, this changes everything. I'll start the legal documentation today, but keep a backup offsite. If what you found connects Martin to that tanker case, he won't just defend himself. He'll erase anyone who can remember the past. I won't be erased, I said. Not again. The rain stopped as sunlight broke through thin clouds, turning every puddle into a mirror. I could see my reflection faintly, framed by papers and fear, but also something steadier. The silence between heartbeats held the promise of movement, the certainty that the next step had already begun. Morning light crept through the blinds, slicing the kitchen into quiet lines of gold and dust. I hadn't slept. Every sound, the kettle clicking, the creak of the old chair, felt louder than it should. On the table lay the flash drive and a sealed envelope from David that I hadn't yet opened. I watched the two objects for a long moment, the living and the dead sharing the same space. Claire called just after 8. I've reviewed what Eli sent, she said. The files are authentic. The audio of Martin and Derek is damning, but not yet admissible. We'll need chain of custody documentation before presenting it. Keep everything exactly as you found it. I will, I said. My voice was hoarse. How's Jacob? He's being processed for conditional release. Lyle signed the paperwork this morning. You'll see him soon. Relief came slow, like thawing ice. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me, she replied. Thank the truth for finally making noise. I ended the call and turned back to David's envelope. I broke the seal carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded photograph of him and Jacob fishing by the lake, their smiles unposed. The letter was written in his familiar, patient script. Zoe, if you're reading this, you've already faced the storm I hoped would pass us by. You were always the one who saw truth in the margins, not in the headlines. If anyone uses my name to twist the math, trust what you feel. People may bend numbers, but they can't fake rhythm. Listen for it. The pattern that repeats too perfectly to be real. Love always finds the flaw. I traced the ink with my fingers, his handwriting steady even near the end. For a moment, I could hear his laugh again, soft and practical. I folded the letter back into its envelope and placed it beside the flash drive. They belonged together, the voice of the living and the warning of the dead. At 10, Jacob called. Mom, he said, his voice still rough. They let me out. Lyle said there was new evidence. Did you do something? I did what your father would have, I said. I read between the lines. He laughed once, almost a sob. I owe you. You owe me breakfast, I interrupted. Come home. When he arrived, he looked younger than before. The weight of fear temporarily lifted. He hugged me like he hadn't since he was a teenager. They treated me like a criminal, he said. All those hours, all those questions, I almost started to believe them. Don't, I said softly. That's how power works. It makes you doubt your own honesty. He noticed the flash drive on the table. Is that what saved me? It's what started saving us, I said. But the fight isn't over. We sat together, the kind of silence that felt earned, not empty. Then my phone rang again. The number was private, but I knew the rhythm of his calls by heart. I answered. Zoe. Martin's voice was calm, polished. I'm relieved Jacob is free. I told you I'd handle it. You didn't handle anything, I said. You buried it until it started breathing again. He chuckled, low and dismissive. Let's not dramatize. What's done is done. The auditors will confirm it was a system error. I've already issued a statement. I have something better than a statement, I said. I have your voice. There was a pause, then the faint clink of glass. You're bluffing. Am I? He sighed. You've always had a talent for making noise from numbers. But remember, Zoe, I can be louder. I ended the call without another word. Jacob stared at me. Was that him? Yes, I said. And he's scared. I opened my laptop and inserted the flash drive. Eli's cloud backup was there, but I wanted to see it myself. I clicked the audio file again. Martin's voice spilled from the speakers, cold and precise. You'll classify it as an insurance offset. Derek's reply followed, faint and trembling. People died, Martin. And then the line that would haunt me forever. People forget, Derek. Numbers don't. Jacob's eyes widened. He said that? He said that. I stopped the playback. And now he'll answer for it. Just then, an email notification appeared. The sender's name made my stomach twist. Derek Vale. The subject line read, Not everything is in the drive. The message contained one sentence. The hard copy is hidden where David used to keep his ledgers. Then a single attachment. A scanned image of an accounting ledger with a handwritten note beside it. You'll make it look clean. The ink and pressure matched Martin's handwriting perfectly. I called Claire immediately. We have a direct link. His handwriting on a false entry. That's human evidence, she said. It holds more weight than any file, but don't share it yet. The chain of custody isn't sealed. Bring everything to my office tomorrow. We'll coordinate with Lyle. When the line disconnected, I sat back in the chair, heart pounding. The air felt heavy, electric. I looked again at David's letter. Listen for the pattern that repeats too perfectly. I glanced at the file timestamps. Each transfer occurred exactly 21 days apart, always on a Thursday, always at 3:45 p.m. No real system runs that perfectly. It was his pattern, his warning made real. That night, Jacob dozed on the couch, exhaustion pulling him under. I stayed awake, replaying the audio, studying the ledgers, tracing connections with a pencil until the paper tore. Every repetition led back to Martin. Every silence between figures echoed with intent. Near midnight, a car engine idled outside again. I peeked through the blinds. Headlights washed across the yard before fading away. I reached for my husband's old revolver from the drawer, not out of fear, but memory. He used to keep it for security audits in rough districts. I held it for a moment, then set it down. Violence was his language, not mine. I returned to the letter and read the final line once more. Love always finds the flaw. My husband wasn't just warning me about corruption. He was teaching me how to win, with patience, precision, and faith in truth. Before dawn, I printed 3 copies of the ledger and placed them in separate envelopes marked for Claire, Eli, and Detective Lyle. I sealed David's letter inside the one meant for the detective. When I finished, I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle, the kind that wasn't empty but full of waiting. Outside, the sky began to pale. I whispered to the silence, You fought with noise, Martin. I'll fight with numbers. And when they speak, they'll sound like justice. The morning after felt heavier than any storm. Sunlight fell like interrogation through the blinds, slicing across the table where the copies of the ledger lay beside my coffee cup. My hands trembled not from fear, but from anticipation. Something irreversible had begun. Before I could reach for the phone, it rang on its own, vibrating against the wood until I answered. It was Claire. "The documents reached Lyle," she said. "He's cross-checking with federal banking logs. Zoe, brace yourself. This is going to escalate fast." "How fast?" I asked. "Martin's already moving," she said. "He went on television this morning. He's doing interviews about corporate integrity, calling the allegations against the company malicious fabrications from a grieving widow." I turned on the TV. There he was, framed by the soft light of a studio, dressed in his immaculate suit, his hands folded like a priest's. "My wife," he said, "is struggling with loss. Sometimes grief clouds memory. I asked the public for compassion rather than judgment." He said my name like it was a synonym for pity. I turned off the sound, unable to hear my own character rewritten in real time. "He's setting the stage," I told Claire. "He wants the world to see me as unstable before the truth gets there." "Let him," she said. "Public sympathy fades. Evidence doesn't. Just keep your composure. Detective Lyle is calling a meeting at noon." Before I could reply, my phone buzzed again. A message from Eli. "Check your mail. It's happening." I opened my laptop. A video had gone viral overnight, leaked by an anonymous source. It was the audio clip, Martin's voice, calm and cutting. "People forget, Derek. Numbers don't." The world had heard it. The comments were exploding, journalists dissecting every syllable. For once, the silence wasn't his weapon. It was mine. By noon, I was sitting across from Lyle in a small office at the precinct. He looked older than yesterday, the kind of tired that comes from waking up inside a truth too big to unsee. "Mrs. Hartman," he said quietly, "you were right. The ledger entries match withdrawals from the Kent Group Pension Fund. The sums add up to $250,000, the exact amount tied to your son's case. The transfer path matches the offshore accounts you flagged." "Then Jacob is clear?" I asked. "He's free," Lyle said. "Officially, but Martin isn't finished. He's already filed for a restraining order against you, citing mental distress. He's painting you as unstable and dangerous." I let out a slow breath. "Dangerous is a matter of perspective, Detective." He smiled faintly, then opened a small folder. "There's something else. I reopened your husband's case file." "My husband's?" The words caught in my throat. "You mean his death?" "Yes," Lyle said. "The autopsy listed a cardiac event, but the coroner's report was signed by a substitute examiner on a day that doesn't exist in the official schedule. Someone tampered with his medical record." The air in the room thickened. "Are you saying David didn't die naturally?" "I'm saying the paperwork doesn't line up," he replied. "We'll investigate quietly, but you should know, Martin's name appears on one of the hospital's endowment ledgers that same month." I closed my eyes. The room tilted slightly, the truth pressing down like gravity. He took my husband's company, my son's name, and now maybe his life. "We don't know yet," Lyle said. "But we will." Before I could respond, the door opened. Claire stepped in, holding a manila envelope. "The Treasury liaison confirmed the offshore route," she said. "And Zoe, the FBI Financial Crimes Division wants the originals. They've seen enough." Lyle looked at me. "They'll need your statement. You're the key witness." "I'll do it," I said, though my voice sounded far away. Claire placed her hand on mine. "We'll protect you. This time, the system's on your side." As we walked out, a journalist's voice blared from a lobby television. Kent Group CEO Martin Kent denies allegations of fraud following the leak of a private conversation between him and a former employee, now deceased. Derek Vale. My stomach turned at the word deceased. He was gone, perhaps silenced before he could speak again. In the parking lot, Claire stopped beside her car. "They found Derek's body early this morning," she said quietly. "Cabin fire up north. They're calling it accidental. But the timing—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I felt the world tilt again. "Then he'll erase the rest of us if we let him." "Then we won't let him," Claire said. "We move first." That night, I met Eli at his office, a small rented space above a hardware store. The city outside buzzed with the low hum of disbelief. He gestured toward a wall of screens. "The story's everywhere now," he said. "Half the media calls you a hero, the other half a lunatic. But there's no putting the genie back in the bottle." I looked at the headlines. Corporate scandal. Widow exposes pension laundering scheme. Who is Zoe Hartman? The woman behind the leak. My hands shook as I read them. I didn't want fame. I wanted my husband's name cleared. My son's dignity returned. "Martin will try to counterattack," Eli said. "He'll sue, maybe go after you for defamation. But with Derek's death, he's cornered." "He doesn't need to win," I said. "He just needs to make people forget." He handed me a printed statement. "Then don't let them. Tomorrow's press conference. Read this if you're ready." "I'm not ready," I said, "but I will be." When I got home, the air inside felt different, charged, waiting. A single envelope lay on the doorstep with my name printed in Martin's handwriting. Inside was a single typed line. "You're destroying a legacy built in both our names. Stop before you have nothing left to protect." I tore it in half, then in half again, until it became paper dust. At midnight, my phone rang once more. The number was Lyle's. "Mrs. Hartman," he said, his voice steady. "I wanted you to hear it from me. We cross-checked the Kent Legacy Fund. The offshore routing number matches the personal trust Martin opened right after your husband died." I didn't answer. I just listened to the quiet that followed. Lyle spoke again, his tone gentler. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry." For a long moment, neither of us said anything. It felt like standing at the edge of something immense. The past collapsing into a single point of understanding. My husband's death, Jacob's accusation, every shadow Martin cast. They were all part of the same machine. "Thank you," I said finally. "Now let's finish this." When I hung up, the night outside was still. The television played on mute in the corner, Martin's face filling the screen with its familiar composure. But for the first time, I saw it clearly. Not the face of a mentor or a savior, but a man terrified of the truth catching up to him. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. The letter from David beside me, the sound of my heartbeat steady. Tomorrow I would speak, not for vengeance, but for memory. The truth had a voice now, and it would no longer whisper. I didn't plan to drive north that morning. I just started the car and let instinct take the wheel. The highway stretched endless and pale under the winter light. Each mile felt like shedding another layer of fear. Jacob sat beside me, quiet, the kind of quiet that carries too many words. "They said Derek's cabin caught fire," he murmured. "Do you think Martin—" "I don't think," I said. "I calculate, and the numbers point to yes." He looked at me, half afraid, half in awe. "You sound like Dad." I smiled faintly. He'd take that as a compliment. The further we drove, the thinner the world became. Fewer houses, fewer witnesses. Snow began to fall, slow and deliberate, each flake catching light like confession. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "We'll stop at the cabin," I said. "If there's anything left, we'll find it." By the time we reached the turnoff, the sun had already vanished behind a wall of gray. The cabin was little more than a skeleton of charred beams and ash. Steam rose from blackened earth. Firefighters were gone, leaving only the smell of wet smoke. I stepped out, boots sinking into half-melted snow. The air tasted of iron. Jacob followed, his voice low. "What are we looking for?" "Answers," I said. "And maybe ghosts." We moved through the wreckage, our breaths visible. Beneath a collapsed beam, something metallic caught the light. A corner of a hard drive, scorched but intact. I crouched and brushed away soot. "He hit a backup," I whispered. "He always did." A sound broke the stillness, the crunch of tires on frozen gravel. A car approached. My stomach tightened. Jacob grabbed my arm. "Mom, get behind the truck," I said. He hesitated. "Now!" The car stopped at the edge of the clearing. A man stepped out, his silhouette sharp against the headlights. Even through the haze, I knew the way he moved. Calm, deliberate, rehearsed. Martin. His coat hung immaculate despite the snow, his breath barely visible. "Zoe," he called softly, like a lover at a doorway. "I told you to let it go." I straightened slowly. "You should have known better than to burn things in winter," I said. "Fire doesn't hide in snow." He smiled. "Always poetic, always naive. You think you can undo me with ledgers and sympathy?" "I don't need to undo you," I said. "You're already collapsing under your own arithmetic." He took a few steps closer. "You're standing in a crime scene," he said. "If they find that drive in your hand, who do you think they'll blame?" "The woman who found it," I said, "or the man who came back to collect it." The silence between us was thin, fragile. I heard Jacob's faint breath behind the truck. Martin's eyes shifted, catching movement. "He's here, isn't he?" he said softly. "You should have left him out of this." I took a step forward, blocking his view. "He deserves to see how lies end." Martin tilted his head, studying me. "You've changed," he said. "You used to believe in people. Now you believe in proof." "Proof is what survives belief," I said. For the first time, his mask cracked. He took another step toward me. Snowflakes clung to his coat, melting into small dark wounds. "Give me the drive," he said. "You don't understand what you're playing with." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You built an empire on borrowed integrity, and now it's asking for a repayment." He moved closer, too close, his breath fogging in the cold between us. "Zoe," he said, "think about your son." "I am," I said. "Every second." Jacob's voice broke through the wind. "Mom, behind you!" I turned just as Martin lunged, not at me, but toward the beam where the hard drive had been. His foot caught on the edge of the debris and he stumbled. I stepped aside, his arm brushing my coat. He regained balance, his face contorted, no longer calm or composed. For a heartbeat, we stood in mirror image. Two people who once shared a home, now divided by truth. A distant rumble echoed, low and growing. I realized too late what it was. The propane tank near the cabin's remains. The flames had crawled unseen, feeding under the debris. A bloom of orange light surged behind Martin. I shouted, "Jacob, get down!" The explosion came like thunder. Heat, light, and silence collided all at once. The blast threw me backward into the snow. For a long moment, the world was only white. When the ringing in my ears faded, I heard a voice calling my name. "Mom!" Jacob's face appeared above me, streaked with soot. He pulled me to my feet, his hands shaking. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," I said, though my knees trembled. "The drive." He held up his fist. In his palm was the scorched metal casing. "Got it." I laughed, the sound raw and breaking. "You fight quieter," I said. His eyes widened, understanding. He nodded. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Martin's car was gone, its tracks already filling with snow. I didn't know if he had escaped or been swallowed by the blast. And in that moment, I didn't care. The truth would surface whether he lived or not. Jacob wrapped his coat around me as the first responders arrived. The cabin burned low, embers glowing like fallen stars. Lyle's voice cut through the chaos as he approached, snow crunching beneath his boots. "Mrs. Hartman," he said, breathless. "What happened?" "Fate," I said softly. "And math." He looked at the charred wreckage, then at the drive in Jacob's hand. "Is that?" "It's the last piece," I said. "Handle it carefully. It's proof of everything." He nodded, calling an officer to secure it. "We'll process it tonight. Get you both checked out." As paramedics guided me toward the ambulance, Jacob walked beside me. His hand found mine. "I thought you wanted to fix the past," he said. "Turns out, you were rebuilding the future." I squeezed his hand. One doesn't exist without the other. The medic wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I watched as Lyle oversaw the scene, his breath visible in the cold. Behind him, the smoke thinned, revealing the sky turning pale blue again, like forgiveness in motion. Jacob looked at me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, respect. "I didn't know you could be this strong," he said. "Neither did I admitted. "But sometimes you find strength where the silence lives." He smiled faintly, then looked toward the rising sun. "What now?" "Now," I said, "we let the truth breathe." As the ambulance doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the ruined cabin fading behind a veil of snow. Somewhere inside that wreckage, numbers were giving way to light. The world was still cold, still imperfect, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like it was beginning to balance itself again. 2 days after the fire, snow covered the city like a memory trying to hide its own evidence. I hadn't slept. Every hour felt stretched between fear and resolve. The drive Jacob saved at the cabin was now in federal custody, encrypted and cataloged, but Eli had sent me a message before handing it over. I mirrored the backup in the cloud. Your husband's archive was linked to it. I sat in my study with David's old laptop, the hum of its fan as fragile as breath. I connected to the cloud address Eli provided and typed the password David had once used for everything. Lighthand 2020. It didn't work. I tried again with small variations, then remembered what he used to tell me when we worked side by side. The truth is never in the math. I typed the phrase without spaces and pressed enter. The screen flickered, then filled with folders named for months and years. One stood out. July 2018. Personal. I clicked it. Inside were text files, scanned ledgers, and an audio recording labeled "For Zoe." My pulse caught. I hesitated for a breath that felt like an eternity, then pressed play. His voice filled the room, soft and measured, the way he used to speak when explaining something simple but important. If you're hearing this, it means you found what they tried to erase. Don't let them bury the truth in numbers. I built the system to protect the employees, not to feed an empire. Martin was supposed to help. But when power learns convenience, ethics becomes currency. If he turns against you, remember what we built together. Light the truth quietly. It doesn't need thunder to be seen. I covered my mouth, tears hot against the cold air. It wasn't just a message. It was a map. At the end of the recording, a series of beeps played, a hidden code embedded in the audio waveform. I sent the file to Claire immediately. Minutes later, she called back. Zoe, that code is a checksum. Your husband hid a verification key inside his voice file. If the FBI runs it, they'll authenticate every fraudulent document tied to the Kent Legacy Fund. So David left the key in his own voice, I whispered. He left it in trust, she said. He wanted you to find it. I looked out the window. Snow kept falling in lazy spirals. Then we'll finish what he started. By noon, Lyle arrived at my house with 2 agents. They carried portable scanners and laptops, their breath visible in the winter air. We're running the checksum now, one of them said. If it matches, we'll have irrefutable proof. I nodded, holding the envelope with David's letter close. Lyle stood near the fireplace, his posture formal but his eyes kind. We're issuing a warrant, he said. Martin's at his corporate headquarters preparing to fly out of the country. We'll stop him before he gets on the plane. Do it quietly, I said. He built his life on appearances. Let the truth end it in silence. Lyle nodded once. We'll keep you informed. After they left, the house felt both lighter and emptier. Jacob came from the kitchen, holding 2 mugs of coffee. Is it over? He asked. Almost, I said. One last line of proof. He sat beside me, watching the snow through the window. Dad would have been proud of you, he said softly. I hope he's proud of both of us, I replied. You didn't give up, even when I almost did. The clock ticked steady between us. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from Claire. Verification complete. The code matches every falsified transfer. The Department of Justice is drafting charges. Martin won't make it to his flight. Jacob exhaled sharply. They caught him? Soon, I said. Justice moves like winter. It arrives quietly, but nothing stops it once it starts. Later that evening, I walked into David's study, now half filled with boxes of evidence and paper trails. I turned on the old desk lamp. Its warm circle of light spread over the keyboard. For a moment, I could almost see him there, sleeves rolled up, humming softly as he worked. I closed my eyes and listened to the faint echo of his voice, replaying in my head. You always said truth was numbers, I whispered. Turns out, it was a heartbeat. When I opened my eyes again, the screen had dimmed to black, reflecting only the glow of the window behind me. I opened a new document and began typing, not as an accountant, but as a witness. Every keystroke felt like stitching something back together that had been torn apart. Halfway through, the front door opened and Lyle stepped in, snow clinging to his coat. His face carried the exhaustion of someone who'd finally caught up with time. He's in custody, he said simply. At the airport. He tried to board under a private alias. The arrest was clean. I nodded, the tension in my shoulders breaking into tremors. Did he say anything? Just one thing, Lyle said. He asked if you'd forgive him. I met his eyes. I forgave the man I thought he was. The rest isn't mine to forgive. He nodded slowly. That's fair. He handed me a small envelope. The FBI sent this for you. It's your husband's voice file, copied and authenticated. They said it belongs with you. After he left, I sat back at the desk and opened the envelope. Inside was a small drive labeled, "The truth was never in the math." I plugged it in, pressed play again, and let David's voice fill the house one last time. The sound was softer now, distant, almost part of the snow outside. When the message ended, I whispered to the empty room, "I kept the light, David. It's still here." The snow outside glowed faintly under the streetlights, each flake reflecting the warmth of something long protected. In that quiet, the numbers finally stopped shouting. They just breathed. By the time dawn reached the city, the world had already begun rewriting itself. Every news channel carried the same headline: CEO Martin Kent detained at Denver International Airport on federal charges of fraud and obstruction of justice. His face filled the screen, calm as ever, though his eyes looked smaller, stripped of the certainty they once carried. I turned off the television and sat by the window, the light gray and quiet. Snow had stopped falling, but its memory clung to every surface. The phone rang once, twice. I answered. "Mrs. Hartman," Detective Lyle said, his tone softer than before. "It's over. He's been taken into custody without incident. We found the matching transfer records on the drive your son recovered. The Department of Justice will handle the rest." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight leave my body inch by inch. "Did he say anything?" Lyle hesitated. "Just that he didn't mean for it to go this far. He called it a mistake of loyalty, not greed." "Loyalty," I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Men like him build temples to loyalty, but they never pray inside them. He didn't respond for a moment. "We'll be filing formal closure on Jacob's case this afternoon. The charges are void. He's free and cleared." When I hung up, Jacob was standing in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You heard?" he asked. I nodded. "He's under arrest." He sat across from me, his shoulders finally relaxing. "I thought I'd feel happy," he said. "But it just feels quiet." "Justice usually does," I said. "It's not about noise. It's about balance." He smiled faintly. "You sound like Dad again." I reached across the table, taking his hand. "Your father taught me that truth doesn't shout. It waits. It trusts that time will eventually listen." The doorbell rang mid-morning. Claire stood there, her coat dusted with snow, eyes tired but shining. "They're calling it the Hartman case now," she said. "The papers, the agencies, they're using your name as a symbol of reform." "I didn't do it for that," I said. "I know," she replied. "That's why it matters." She handed me a document. "You'll need to sign this to finalize the property lien release. All assets tied to Martin's accounts will revert to the pension fund. The company's shareholders approved it last night." I read the top line. "Restitution agreement, Hartman pension recovery." It was the first time I'd seen my husband's name associated with something good in years. "He would have liked that," I said. Claire smiled. "He'd be proud of you." Jacob came to the doorway, a tentative grin forming. "So what happens now?" Claire looked at him. "Now we make sure this never happens again." Later that afternoon, the courthouse was half empty, quiet except for the click of shoes on polished floors. I sat in the back row while the clerk read through the list of charges: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and tampering with federal records. Martin sat between 2 attorneys, his posture immaculate, his hair still perfectly parted, but his hands trembled when he reached for a glass of water. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he stood and looked around the room, his gaze skimming past me as if I were smoke. "What began as protection turned into deception," he said. "I never meant harm to the people I loved, but sometimes good intentions write bad math." It wasn't an apology. It was arithmetic trying to disguise regret. The judge spoke briefly, ruling for forfeiture of assets and recommending maximum sentencing. No one applauded. No one spoke. Justice arrived quietly, the way truth prefers. Outside, reporters swarmed the steps, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Claire and I stepped aside as they shouted my name. One question rose above the others. "Mrs. Hartman, do you forgive him?" I paused at the bottom step, the cold air stinging my throat. "I forgave the man I thought I married," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing the truth to live without fear." They fell silent. For once, the noise of headlines stopped chasing the heartbeat of the story. That evening, the sky turned clear, a rare stretch of calm after weeks of storm. Jacob joined me on the balcony overlooking the city. The lights below shimmered against the snow, each one reflected twice, once in the glass, once in the heart. "He'll go to prison," Jacob said. "Do you think he'll ever understand what he did?" "Understanding and regret aren't the same," I said. "But the law doesn't measure the heart. It measures actions. That's enough." He nodded slowly. "And us? What do we do now?" "We rebuild," I said. "Not from what we lost, but from what we refuse to lose." He leaned on the railing, watching the street below. "I never told you this," he said quietly. "But when they took me in, I kept thinking of what you used to tell me as a kid. That silence can be its own kind of strength. I thought you meant it as comfort. Now I think you meant it as truth." I smiled, tears stinging my eyes. "I meant both." He slipped his arm around my shoulder. For the first time since this began, I allowed myself to breathe without waiting for the next blow. The wind carried a softness I hadn't felt in months, as if the world itself was exhaling. From inside the house, the television murmured with another report. Legislators propose new Financial Accountability Act inspired by the Hartman case. The phrase echoed, both surreal and humbling. "Looks like Dad's numbers are still teaching people," Jacob said. "Yes," I whispered. "And maybe they always will." Below us, a single siren faded into distance, leaving only the sound of wind brushing snow from the rooftops. The city moved on, but the truth we unearthed would stay, a quiet reminder that justice doesn't roar. It whispers, and in that whisper, the world learns how to listen. 2 years passed before the world learned how to say our name without pity. The Hartman Initiative had grown from a local reform project into a national movement for corporate transparency. It wasn't born from ambition, only from survival. Every time I saw the logo, a faint outline of a flame inside a circle, I thought of the night the cabin burned and how the truth found its way through ash and snow. I had moved to a smaller house near the foothills, where mornings smelled like pine and quiet rain. The city's noise was far enough to feel distant, yet near enough to remind me that life kept moving. My days were simpler now. Coffee at 6, a walk along the trail, then hours spent reviewing grant applications for the fund that bore my husband's name. We used what had once been stolen to rebuild the retirement savings of those who had lost everything under Martin's schemes. It wasn't vengeance. It was balance restored. Jacob visited often. He'd started teaching business ethics at the community college, a decision that surprised neither of us. You turned your scars into syllabus, I teased once. He only smiled. You taught me that some lessons are worth repeating. On a cold February afternoon, Claire drove up the mountain road to visit. She looked healthier than I remembered, her hair longer, her laugh freer. "You've become something of a legend, you know," she said as we sat by the fire. "People quote your interviews, the way you talk about justice like it's an act of faith." "It is," I said. "Faith that truth still matters when no one's watching." She reached into her bag and handed me an envelope from the Department of Justice. "The Hartman clause passed the Senate this morning. Every corporate audit involving public pensions now requires independent verification and whistleblower protection." For a moment, I couldn't speak. "They used his name," I whispered. "They used your fight," she corrected. I unfolded the letter slowly, reading the official seal, the signatures, the words that felt like closure carved into law. David's handwriting had always been neat and structured. This document, though typed, carried his spirit, precise, calm, incorruptible. "He'd say, 'Numbers finally learned humility,'" I said. Claire laughed softly. "He'd be proud of you, Zoe." After she left, I stood by the window watching snow drift against the trees. The world was quieter than it used to be. My phone buzzed. A message from Eli with a link to an article. Former CEO Martin Kent denied parole. I didn't click it. The outcome didn't matter anymore. Justice had done its work. The rest was time's responsibility. Later that evening, I met Dr. Helen Cross for our usual tea session. She'd become more of a friend than a therapist over time. Her voice carried that measured calm that could turn guilt into reflection. "It's been 2 years," she said, pouring tea. "Do you forgive him?" I looked at the steam curling between us. "I forgave the man," I said slowly. "Not the silence that let him thrive." She smiled knowingly. "That's enough. Forgiveness isn't absolution. It's release." We sat without speaking for a while, the sound of wind weaving through the pines outside. Then she said, "You know, your story has helped people who'll never meet you. It's become a kind of compass for those who think truth is too small to matter." "Truth isn't small," I said. "It's just quiet." When I returned home that night, an email waited in my inbox. The subject line read, "Hartman Clause signed into law." I clicked it open. The message was brief, just a note from Claire and a photograph of the signing ceremony. My eyes lingered on the last line of her message. "Justice whispers, Zoe, but you made the world listen." I closed the laptop and walked to the study. David's letter still sat framed on the wall, its ink faded but intact. I traced the words with my fingertips. "If you ever doubt the math, follow the silence. Truth hides where numbers stop talking." The lamp on my desk flickered as if agreeing. I sat down and opened a fresh page in my journal. My handwriting had grown slower, but steadier. I wrote, "Light doesn't argue with darkness. It waits for the right moment to be seen." Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, soft as breath. The world was still flawed, still human, but the balance had shifted. Somewhere, a new accountant would open a file, a journalist would ask a question, a widow would whisper courage to herself, and the light behind numbers would guide them. I leaned back, letting the quiet settle. Somewhere deep inside that silence, I heard David's voice again. Not as an echo, but as continuation. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It breathes, it heals, it begins again. And in that moment, surrounded by snow, memory, and peace, I realized the truth never needed an ending, only a place to rest.